Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is going to be a Q&A video where people have asked me questions and I'm going to give them answers. In this case, the questions are coming from a Facebook post that I made, but in future Q&A videos, the questions are going to come from the Q&A videos themselves because I am going to try and make this a regular thing. Like so many things I try to make regular things. Again, here comes a new thing I'm going to try to make a regular thing. This thing being a weekly Q&A video. So if you got questions that were not asked in this video, or you other stuff that I guess you want to say, or hell, if you want to correct me on some things because maybe I lied about something, then comment on this video and it may show up in the next video, including corrections, because I really don't want to be wrong about stuff. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Razer for basically being a sponsor and giving me all this cool stuff, including the Razer Blade Pro, which everything you're seeing is happening on right now, live in real time, for me anyway. I guess it's a recording, you're watching on YouTube, but the FL stuff that I'm going to be doing, I'm looking at Facebook, recording it with a video, all that, all the machine, all at one time, and at high frame rates and stableness, it's very good is what I'm saying. Good time. Also, I want to shout out Splice. Splice has been nice enough to give me a code that gives you guys 1 free month trial of Splice Sounds if you want to go do that. And I highly recommend you do if you like using samples at all, because if you do, then Splice is pretty much, I really want that to be the future in the way that samples are handled, because it honestly makes the original approach of just having billions of samples and 4 things that are actually good kind of dumb. Anyway, there's a code, gets you a free month in the description of this video, along with links to stuff to the Razer stuff. So just just do stuff with that. It's a good time. Go check all that out. Awesome. So let's ask some questions. Oh, so in the Facebook post, I asked people to like questions they wanted to see answered, and usually when I do that kind of stuff, like when I did the K tutorials, I would filter through the popular votes because I didn't really want to do the most popular voted things, because that would just end up being like the same stuff and over again. But this time I am just going to read all the popular questions. All right, is there a way to do pitch correction with the stuff that comes with FL Studio, like what Melodyne does? Yes there is. There's actually a specific thing in FL, that was my Facebook, whoops, called Newtone, which is pretty sweet, and you can actually access it by going into any kind of sound, and there's edit, yeah, here it is, edit and pitch corrector. Boip. You can see that because the camera's in the way. If I right click up here, is the menu, and when I hear it says edit and pitch corrector, and it opens up this dude, which is basically the Melodyne equivalent. So the FL also has the auto-tune equivalent, which is Pitcher, which is the real-time version of this, where it does the live processing, and this is the Melodyne equivalent, where it's not real-time, it's actual processing, and then you can do all the very intense stuff like feel it, you have a lot of control over a lot of elements, including things like just centering everything like that, which oftentimes whenever I've used this, that's kind of like the thing I want to do with it, is like I want the character and the vibrato or whatever, but I want it to be in tune. So that's what this is good for. But yes, that should answer that question. Incorrect order, and that's also the incorrect button. Okay, so this button first, hi, this camera, yay, and then Facebook. That's how it's supposed to go. I hope this audio is in sync correctly. It's difficult to keep all that stuff in line, but whatever. Next question. How much would a woodchuck chuck if you were the chuck chucking wood? How much could a woodchuck chuck if you were the chuck chucking wood? My assumption is that how much wood a woodchuck could chuck would not change depending on whether or not I am the chuck and how much wood I am currently chucking. After that, so a kick drum is basically a sine wave with a pitch envelope on it. What are some ways of giving a character? Some unorthodox ways. Well, a fun thing to do is see FL first and then switch over. Yeah. With the pitch envelope concept. So if you want to sort of separate it, usually what I'll do is I'll have a low frequency sort of sound, right? And that's what you just described, where it's an envelope on it, and it kind of just falls down, and that's what gets us. And of course, you also want the same volume envelope on it to, because you want it to stop. So you have a low frequency one, and that's the low end of your kick, and then on top of that, you have kind of an interesting sort of freedom, because what you do is you make a high frequency, broken ass, like ridiculous tone. And this is pretty easy to do if you're using something like Citrus, which is FM based. Yeah, right. And then you make the output, you're going to put a volume envelope on it, but unlike the bass part of it, you're going to make it much, much, much faster. And the reason for this being that it's higher frequency, because if you made the low frequency kick this fast, it wouldn't have enough time to terminate low enough frequency to even feel like it's a bass, so you have to have a larger time on the volume envelope. But for the higher frequency guys, you want it to be really, really short, so that really no matter what's happening, it doesn't have enough time to terminate, so that you don't get a tone, you get a click. So beyond doing that, if actually without touching any extra oscillators, if you just want to use one oscillator, you can still do this thing with the pitch envelope, only you just gotta get complicated about it. So in this example, with what Citrus is set to do, the middle line represents whatever pitch I set it to. So in this case, 60 hertz. So it's going to come down to 60 hertz and freeze if I had the volume open up. It would stay there. But the range by default is 1 octave, right? So if I make it all the way up here, it's now 4 octaves. So 4 octaves from center to top, and it's also 4 octaves down to bottom. And I could also, no, if I want the whole range, you have to go down farther and then just increase the pitch. So now the speed of, I'm gonna open up my control panel here for a second and turn down my massive volume so that crazy stuff doesn't get in the mic. Oh, better. So this, the curve accents, the FX, the kick, as you said in your thing. So given that, the first step in convoluting it after I turn on high quality envelopes, because damn, would actually be to just mess with the curve itself, especially like at such these tiny values. If you can just have it move around ridiculously quickly in strange angles, and it'll have a different like clicky kind of quality. And then notice what I'm doing here with the changing of the lines here. The tension will, like, if it's a straight line, you're telling it it's a straight motion and pitch. But if you do a curve like this, it's saying that it's kind of hanging around a particular pitch more, and then it very quickly snaps down to wherever the next point is. It's important that you saw what I was doing there, because it means that you can sort of like, you can angle in the spectrum where snap is. So that's another way to approach developing kicks on your own. All right, scene change. Facebook, yeah. How do I save previously made sounds for other tracks? And is there a way to create a bank of those so that they're easy to access? I didn't really mean to sing that, but whatever. What you're describing is presets and samples. These are the two primary ways in which a work in a song is saved. A preset is usually a plugin based thing, like you have Massive or Silent or Serum or Harm or any of those guys. You have a patch, and then you save that patch, and it's loaded as a preset inside that plugin. If you did something more complicated, like, or you used hardware, like you used a synth or something, or a guitar or whatever, it wasn't plugin generated, but had required post processing or whatever, and you still wanted to record that, you might want to save the preset and whatever plugins generated the processing, or you might just want to record the whole thing as a sample. Drums and whatnot are saved as samples, and this is typically a good way to save, that kind of stuff. Presets are usually the way to go. As far as banks and stuff, it's really up to you. Like, every individual plugin developer anyway will have an architecture that's sort of their thing. Like Serum has its own whole directory, so like everything it works in there. It's completely separate from whatever DAW you're in. A DAW's plugins will have perhaps a preset directory that's integrated with the DAW, so you're gonna have to work with that too. So it's really like, it's your own kind of game about how you want your organization to work out, and it can be a little unfortunate sometimes. I don't really save a lot of stuff, and it's not necessarily a good thing that I do that, but as a result, I'm not really big on like crazy or good organization of my stuff. In fact, my file organization is just awful. Is it truly possible to burn out, detrimentally overwork yourself as a music producer in a way that can impair your growth, negatively impact your mental health? Of course, you can do that with anything. It's not an art. That's any kind of a work or a stress thing. There is a limit to how much you can do. Figuring out what that is very difficult, and it's an individual thing, so I can't really talk to you about that, but yeah, it's a thing. Be careful. How can a producer know if there's something missing in his music? If you hear it and it doesn't sound right. I feel like there's a weird disconnect with the thing I say all the time, which is if it sounds good, it is good, with people equating that to mean that if you just decide that it's good, that it's good. That's really not what that means. What it means is that if you listen to the song and without any kind of like consideration on your part, it sounds good, it's good. But if it doesn't sound good, if you hear it and you go, "Gah," something about it's not like sitting well, or it's imbalanced, or it's like compression squishy, or any of the billions of problems that show up in anyone's tracks. Like, if you hear any of that crap, and you hear that and you kind of have a reaction to it, that's how you know it's not good. And like, that step's easy. It's actually the easiest thing to do is to determine whether or not you like something or not, because it's really an instinctual thing. It's what you think is good is built up of what you've listened to throughout your life and your own circumstances and your own experiences, and your attempt at good music yourself is largely an expression of that definition. And you have to work with yourself to even know what that is, because most people don't have the thoughts to do that without thinking about it. What I mean by that is that, like, you have to kind of be told to think about things in the analytical way that I'm always talking about, using references for reference tracks for these things. This is kind of another way to know. Like, if you don't trust your own sensibilities about, like, if you're losing objectivity because you've done the same track for 60 hours straight and you haven't listened to anything else at all, then yeah, you can't be objective anymore, and now you need to go listen to a reference to clear your head out. That's different. That's different than just, like, knowing what is good and what is not good. I hope that helped. Is there a way to change indefinitely the pitch of a sample in the mixer inserts using some FL plugin? I know a pitcher, but I can't use it to increase the pitch beyond the limit of the knob. I'm basically trying to create a Shepherd okay, I see what's a Shepherd tone. Cool. You can do that at generation. You want to do that in post, I see. Not really that I know of in FL. Like pitcher, you said is definitely a thing. I don't really mess around with that very often, but what I would recommend that you look into is Infected Mushrooms manipulator. I use it a lot in some bass sound design, but like one of the things that it does that I'm the most impressed with is post real time pitch morphing, and it's very fast. It's very good sounding. So if you want to mess around with that, I maybe go with there. But I don't know that that's really going to help with specifically generating a Shepherd tone, but you'll find out, I guess. But no, to your general question about is there something in FL that does that in post? How can I increase my production speed? I know making 100 tracks is the way, but it's just making a journey quicker. Any tips for getting what to aim for in the process? All right, so you want to know how to do things faster. Well, do you remember anybody who was watching this? Do you remember the first time you made your first track? The track that you knew was done and was your first track, right? You're like, oh my God, this is my first actual song. You showed everybody, it's super great, it's a good time. And it probably, think about how long it took. It might have not taken a very long time. For some people, it might have taken months. It might have taken actual months to like actually put together and be done with this one whole song. And it's because the first song is where you do all the things. You figure out what you're good and bad at, and like whether like how well you're able to do whatever you want to do. And of course, in the process of doing things, you discover things you want to do that you don't know how to do, and you have to try and figure out how. And it's work. It's hard work. And learning anything new, of course, is. And so then you do that, and then you do the second track. And how much faster did you do that second track? Because from my experience, my second track was about twice as fast. And it really just boils down to experience is the unfortunate thing, because you need to build into yourself a library of answers to lots of situations that you're going to encounter in terms of getting from where you are to where you want to go in your music, which is almost always what you're going to do. Like you can eventually amass an enough knowledge that you can just do what you want the first time, but for the most part, most of the super highest professional work that's done in movies, games, and just regular old music is people that just start shit and then just move it somewhere good. And that is done by having experience to solve problems as they arise, and also to solve problems in the frame of your particular tastes. And so that's where the do 100 songs in a row thing comes from, where you're doing whatever your thing is, and you're going to get really good at that particular class of stuff that is required to do whatever it is that your thing is. And that's just how to get good at stuff. So there's that. For me personally, I had not necessarily perfectionist, but like a kind of an unhealthy view on what I wanted to have in terms of knowing how to do stuff. And my thought on like producing things is usually that I go for elegance and that I want to accomplish as much as I can with as little as I can. And part of that is about speed. It's about that I want to do things quickly. I want to very quickly get to, okay, that's what I wanted to sound like and now it's done kind of territory. And it's absolutely possible to do that, but it is an astonishing amount of work and ultimately not super necessary. And you get there by just keep doing what I just described, like just the experience thing. Like a lot about me knowing what I am able to do is because I've been doing it for a fucking long time. I started in 2004. That's when I began producing music, but I had piano as a kid, so like it's just a huge experience, amassed over decades of doing stuff. So of course I should be able to know something about a lot of this stuff, right? Before I ever even made my first YouTube video, I'd already been doing this stuff for like 8 years. So don't feel too bad about perhaps not being the fastest if you're not necessarily, if you're not even doing it for that long, but also if in the time that you've been doing it, you haven't been doing it as intensely as even I did, because I not just for like the amount of time that I've been doing it, but I had the quite intense luxury of being able to pursue it with a lot of time, with a lot of my free time. So not necessarily fair to compare like direct time for people who might not necessarily have that kind of freedom. But yeah, you get the idea. How do you trigger sections of reset? This is WAV file and Harmor. Example, I have a vocal loop and I want to use the loop as is and trigger sections and still be able to play notes using just the sections. Something like the vocal solo and major laser and DJ Snake Lean On. I have not heard that song. Maybe I have, but I don't recognize it, so I cannot directly reference that. But let me see if I understand this question. Trigger sections of reset. This is a file. Vocal loop as is trigger sections, still be able to play notes using just the sections. Okay, so there is a way to do that. Oh, that's just keyboard mapping. You use keyboard mapping. Okay, cool. Let me just, okay, so nope, FL first, signature first. There you go. Cool. Boink. If I understand your question correctly. So, all right. So to get what I think you're after here, what you can do, you just put your thing in there. And if you wanted to play it like a sampler, which is I think what you're going after here, without altering it with the pitching, without changing pitches, then you're gonna have to make it so that the pitches are all the same. You do that by going to pitch and keyboard mapping, and you go low to high and high to low, and this compresses all of the pitches down so that everything is C5 or original pitch. So if you have a longer sample with different like notes or whatever, and you want to trigger them individually, then now it'll play all the different notes will be the same note. But now we can keyboard map the time position to be whatever we want it to be. And there is actually even a helpful thing in here in this little drop down menu to say to map time offset the last hit key. So you can kind of like map it like a sampler, like you're using the FPC almost. As for looping, what you're going to want to do is you can either, there is an actual looping method, but the looping that it does, I don't believe is conducive to the specific thing that you're asking for. To that end, you might want to adjust the speed. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either abandon the speed entirely, like turn the speed off, and actually like have the playback be an envelope on the time knob itself. And if you do that, all you need to do on the envelope is just make it straight, like however long the sample is, and the correct length of time, play like a straight beginning and the end with the line there, and then it'll just play it like you're just playing it like with the speed on. And then you do that, and then you also keyboard map the offset to be wherever you want in your sample. It'll play it back from wherever that start is in that sample, from wherever key you map it to. And I'm pretty sure that's what you wanted. Is that what you wanted? I hope that helped. Yeah. Let's try and move on. Doof. If I can remember how freaking XSplit works. I'm a professional. I make movie trailer epic scores. How would you go about promoting or getting your music into the right hands for film? Would you have to be signed? Oh God. All right. So professional music, not necessarily music just to be music. Like I said earlier, that term that I used, that turn of phrase, professional music as in like a product that's used in other artistic works like movies or video games, is a very strange field and is also saturated by a very particular kind of source. And it's not necessarily that there's a shit ton of composers flying around and like engineers and whatever, although that is also the case. It's just that there are so many of them that there are services out there where movie studios can just license completely finished scores in giant packs all at once, totally original, legit even, and like pay stupidly small amounts of money, like $30. It's really like lame. And that will be all they need to have that music. And then some guy, let's think the arranger for the whole movie, like the sound director dude for the film, will be the one that actually puts it together and arranges it for the movie. So whoever made that song never saw the film, mind you. This isn't always the case, obviously. There are like sort of the high level composers who absolutely do the kind of work that you're thinking about, but they only do that because they're high level. The efficient way of doing the work is to do that thing I just described. And so like if you want to get in at the ground level, what you're essentially looking to do is to write hundreds of tracks, get it into one of these like licensing portals, and hope that some director likes your stuff enough to then find you, I guess. Like beyond that, I'm honestly not totally sure, other than like get big enough that like a movie production company and publishing studio think you're worth like allowing you to like work like a human. Beyond that, I got nothing. Should I pay more attention to LUFS or RMS? And what is a good general level to have your track at before mastering? All right, so I don't even know what LUFS is. I know that it's some other kind of metering standard. I know what RMS is, and I never use it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. I'm just saying that I never have. And it's just because I am really used to I'm extremely used to peak metering. I am so used to it that I don't really need the extra help that RMS gives you to be more like what Loudness is supposed to be representing in our ears. I honestly don't quite understand the necessity for it. But then again, we do have lots of very like specific and powerful analysis tools to solve lots of problems that people really should be able to just do with their ears. So I shouldn't be complaining. So, like, if you wanna, I guess, is my answer to those two questions. And as far as general level to have track at before mastering, it's not really about where your maximum peak peaks. It's about the difference between your maximum peak and your minimum peak. Not the lowest level, mind you, because the lowest level is always going to be like 0, right? But the lowest peak. And the differences are helpful for especially like the louder the music you're doing, the louder the more difference you want between things like kicks and snares and everything else, and like your basses and everything else and that kind of thing. And specifically what I'm saying is that you want your kicks and snares to be louder than everything else by a lot. You want like the actual musical components of the track, including the bass, to kind of just sit beneath it. I don't really pay attention specifically to like exactly how much. This is really kind of a feel thing, but like you just visually note that the kicks and snares are peaking a lot higher, and then when you put that through compression of any kind, it works out a lot better for that purpose. If you're going for like the mega loudness, because I have to qualify that, but so then it should be like noted that there's just different methods for all kinds of different crap. It's really up to like the individual and the individual genre. FL Studio, when you use the built-in EQ, you set an high pass or low pass, the gain of the filter sound increases. Why does this happen? Okay, so that's what phase distortion does, and what happens, what that is, has to do with what a filter does, right? All right. So you might have heard of the term linear phase EQ or linear phase filters, and you might know what that does. And the opposite of that is minimum phase. And most EQs and most filters that you hear or need to use are minimum phase filters. These do this because they are real time and they don't really have, I don't think they have any latency now that I think about it. I'm not 100% sure about that because I don't code any of this stuff and I've never done any electrical engineering. I only know that essentially a filter or an EQ does its job, and the minimum phase versions do their job by changing the phase of the frequencies irregularly to create phase cancellation or not if you're boosting it, but that's how it makes the cuts or the boosts inside the filters. If you have Serum, fun fact, if you click on the filter image inside the first filter on the main page, it actually shows you the phase difference so you can see what happens. Anyway, the point of that is that if you have a very like solid signal that's like up at 0 dB and is not going above it, if you alter that phase even a little bit, you're going to break that. It's no longer going to be a solid sausage anymore. It's going to have peaks and cuts and whatever because you've just screwed with your phase profile, and it's going to result in a change in level. And it doesn't like. It's really hard to notice in the sound, but it's really easy to notice when that specific situation happens, when your stuff's like right up there. So yeah, that's why it happens. how to manipulate the 3D space in your track. I mean, stereo enhancers and reverbs don't work like that. It will never sound good as if you had a microphone in the middle of a room and played sounds from different locations. I believe some phasing white noise are also necessary to get the true 3D effect, also some background room noise. What do you think about that? That's a lot of weird stuff. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the premise of your statement there that reverb's not going to sound as good as a room stereoization or whatever. Like, also, I'm not even sure that you can necessarily represent that stuff without talking about having a multiple stereo speakers head up anyway, like 7.1, 5.1, all that crap. Unless we're talking about crazy, like, Dolby, like, phasing surround stuff, which, like, there absolutely is a science to, and I have no idea how any of that works. I am aware that it's possible to do things like phase left and right in a particular way with just 2 channels to make things sound like they're ahead, in front of you or behind you. But I don't know what those specific phase changes are. You're gonna have to experiment with that kind of business. White noise, I don't know about that. Background room noise, I don't know about that either. It's really about it really is about the reverb. Like, if you think about why it's a phasing thing, it's because in a space there's reverberations and there's bouncing around the room or whatever. So when you change your position in a space, you're changing necessarily the lengths of the bouncing around, and so you get different timings and different phasing. So the quality of the phasing is essentially describing the dimensions of the room, and like there's definitely math to like even build a physical space with sound like that. Like, that's how a lot of digital reverb devices work. As I just don't know how I don't know about it. I don't know. You didn't answer me at all, so I'll ask again. Would you send me some kick samples, or I should make a pack of drums? I think I did make a pack of drums. Oh, I didn't make a pack of drums, but if you've got that that BT sample pack that has all the AE5 samples in it, some of mine are in there too. They're just not very good because I'm not as good at that as he is. Does your ass ever leave the basement and do live shows? Extremely rarely. Like 3 times ever, and most of them were like at friends' houses. Crap. It's not something I do a lot for Seamless stuff. I have played lots and lots of metal shows, but not so much for this stuff. If I lose interest in producing electronic music, what are some tips to get back into it? I produced in 2012 and went to school for 2 years. Listen to lots of music, lots of new music that you can find, and like get inspired by stuff. Like, any time I ever am in a rut, it's because I'm stuck in like the same content loop, and you need new stimulus to kind of like get yourself into perhaps a new frame of I don't know what, but new things generally help you get out of old ruts. Okay, this guy's a list. This girl, I guess, has a list. Why is your name SeamlessR? So my name is Seamless. I wanted to be Seamless, and even back at that, when I was trying to be Seamless, if you try to make an account anywhere like on Facebook or SoundCloud or any of that, the words that are real words are all taken because it's the internet. So like your options are to be like Seamless and then like some bullshit to try and be unique. And like, what are your options? It's like Seamless Official, Seamless Music, Seamless Beats. Like you see those everywhere, right? And like even I didn't want to do that. That seems so damn dumb. That's not really dumb. I don't really care if you do that. I'm just like, it's not something I wanted to do. So I put an R in there just to be like, R, I'm the real one. Sure, cool. The highest and lowest pitch your voice can reach. I don't know what the highest pitch is, but I do know the lowest pitch is G2. Sometimes I can get down to F or E when I'm sick, but it's mostly just G. If I had to let go of all my gear except for 5 of them, what are those 5? Well, I'd probably keep the laptop. Does that count as 1? That's definitely 1, right? The laptop. Since I guess if 5 means I'm not going to have my speakers or my mic or any of this, so that means I'm gonna keep the headphones. Specifically these headphones. Like the over-ear ones are cool, they're good, they're really good, but these are actually like kind of nicer. So that's what, through? That's 3? Let's just call this guy 2, right? So that's 2. Probably a guitar, at least. I don't really like physical hardware is not that necessary, you know, in the grand scheme of what I do. Like, I have it because it's cool. Like, I like the stuff. It's a lot of fun, like synth stuff especially. But like, if I hadn't made the money for this stuff over because of years of being an actual professional, I would never have actually like wanted to get any of this. Damn, well, does three count? I guess maybe if I cared enough, I'll bring like a launch pad, probably a mouse because regular mice suck. Sure, there you go. I guess my phone too. That's probably important. How the hell did you do that crazy mixer insert routing and fruity convolver site? Oh, okay, that. All right. So you're asking about. I saw that question earlier. I didn't know what you were talking about, and now I remembered. So what I did was, this was for metal mixing. Actually, I did this for my older metalworks. And what happened is I separated with the fruity convolver everything into 5 or 3 bands, however many bands, using the linear phase EQ option because there is one. And the way that works is it's basically the where the hell is it? Was it in special? Oh, it's equalizer. Derp. Yeah, so there's long latency and short latency. It doesn't matter which one you use as long as all of the things that you use after that are the same one, because that's sort of the rub, is that linear phase is extra processing and so it introduces latency. In the case of the convolver, it's not so much extra processing as it is like it's a sound that it's playing the whole spectrum ish. So that means when you EQ it, it's EQing it out like perfectly. I guess kind of, I'm not totally sure about that, but the point is the difference between regular cutting and doing a frequency split with something like the linear phase EQ inside a convolver is that these cuts are perfect. These cuts, if I were to say have this one be open this way and then make another cut that's like up over here and completely just like lattice them together like that, if I played a sound, did nothing to the individual cuts, and I listened to the sound at the end after the cuts, it would sound exactly the same. This is super kind of killer, because if you've ever tried to do a frequency split with just the regular old EQ and you do things like cool, I'm going to make a high pass or a low pass on this side, and like there's going to be another EQ, and then that EQ is going to be at this frequency, but it's going to be a high pass, and like you do the most perfectly put together cuts, and like you still get that little bit of phasing going on because minimum phase EQs are changing the phase of things to do their job, but the linear phase one does not, which means that you can make those perfect cuts and they will come across perfectly if they do match up perfectly. The value of this is that I then had I did this 5 or however many times, low, mid, high, mid, and high. Let's just assume that cuts. And then I try to make them relevant to what's going on. So we have like the sub, we have the kick range, we have the snare range, we have the vocal range, we have the hi-hat range and cymbals and stuff range. And all the various relevant instruments would sidechain into other instruments is this split. Every single one would be split like this. So this would be like the drums split. I'd have the whole drums coming out across, like coming out here. So this is after like I'd done lots of recording. I have already recorded and processed all the drums to sound super bitchin' by themselves. And so I have the drums track, the guitar track, the vocal track. And now I'm doing all this hardcore mixing, and what's happening is things like the low end of the drums track would sidechain into the low end of the bass track. So not sidechaining the whole bass track, just the low end of the bass track, so that marriage of the low frequency activity happens as such that there's not the terrible conflict happening. It's just cut just enough so that it fits together without a lot of headroom damage. Same thing with snares. We get this low mids or the mids or wherever the snare lives, the snare fundamental lives, and put that into the guitar tracks. Put the vocal high mids into the guitar tracks. Put the solos wherever it lives into the guitar tracks. Put a lot of stuff in the guitar tracks. And like that kind of stuff. That's sort of how that would work out. And it's basically like the goal of this, unlike electronic music, like the harder, like dubstepy, like super hardcore stuff, metal, while being very loud, is very much more natural feeling. So it's not as forgiving. It's pretty forgiving, like for like hardcore super compression or whatever, but it can't reach the levels that we can get in electronic stuff without being really bad. So we have to value this kind of like super transparency stuff. And like I've never done this for electronic stuff because there's not really a point for me personally in my own mind, just because when you see that stuff and you hear electronic stuff, it's not transparent. It's not an even mix. It's not an even-handed light compression. It's all hard everything all the time, because that's what makes it sound like that. So if I did this like super splitting and sidechain everything, make it all even and whatever, it would be super even. It'd be super nice and like transparent, but it would sound weak and weird. So that's why I don't do that super often. Yep, did the thing again. Whatever. I guess I don't really care about that, but other people's privacy, I guess. As a result of trying to achieve final masters with a minus 6 dB RMS, do you think that's taken away the authentic feel that music could have, or do you feel like the EDM sound as a whole is unauthentic plastic to begin with? I actually think everything I just said kind of applies to that question. Is that like the not dynamicness of the whole genre is by design and is why we like it. I imagine some people might like it for the music, but I've always kind of liked it for the textural feeling of it, and that's a production and loudness thing. It's a crushing thing, and so like unauthentic and plastic, like you might sure that's exactly what it sounds like. It does sound unauthentic because it's synthetic, and it's that by design is sort of my thought on that. What do you feel are the moral boundaries a musician, producer, DJ should set when involved in the music industry? AKA, where do you draw the line when it comes to business dealings with music? All right, so the most controversial thing I've ever had to deal with, like at a business level with my stuff, is basically what kind of advertising I want to do on my channel. Things like accepting the partnership deal with Razer or doing the affiliate deal with Splice. Like those are relevant to your interests, in my opinion. Like those are things that are sensible and relatable things to have. But like I've been approached by like completely unrelated things, like fashion brands and like watch brands and things. I can't wear watches, by the way. Like I hate having things on my wrist and stuff like that, which like I could do, but it would. They wanted the same kind of attention that I give to sort of like these main sponsors I have, with like, you know, shout outs and whatever. And like how I don't want to be shouting out a watch in the middle of an electronic music educational video. So like, but I could do that, right? So for me, that just feels a little weird to do that. I don't really personally see anything wrong with that, just because, you know, a channel's got to eat, right? But yeah, that's really the most complicated thing I've ever had to deal with. It's mostly about I just want to represent myself, and I also really don't want to do business that isn't the business I want to do. It's kind of a convoluted thing to say, but what I take that to mean, and I hope you took it to mean, is the idea that I could compromise on what I want to do to achieve better business. Like I could make more money, I could have more views, but I would much rather have the business where I don't have to do that kind of crap, where I don't have to sell out on specific things. Like I definitely do. Like I'm fine with advertising. Like I'm doing the Razer thing, for example, that kind of stuff. But, and actually here's another example. Y'all remember Lander, right? I did an ad for Lander, which is an online mastering service. And like, I tried it before I did that video. And like, I tried so hard to like find the good in that service, because like they're paying me, and like I would like to have money for the work I do, and like those kinds of deals, PS, pay a lot, like so much more for a video than ad revenue ever does, but just from YouTube. So I had a pretty big incentive to try and be like, okay, let's just try this out, and like I did, and I felt like such ass after doing that. I don't remember if it's still up or not, but like they've come back to me to do more, and I'm just like, no, I'm not doing that again. It wasn't even so much that the service didn't do what it said it did. It's just that, again, it wasn't relevant, because it was talking about like mastering like punk rock and things, and like classical and like jazz bands and whatever. And I'm like, I gave it like one of my Wizard bass tracks to try and master, or was it one of the RS Silent tracks? I forget, but it didn't do a very good job. And like I should have just acknowledged that then. So that's kind of like, that's sort of where I draw the line, morals wise, is just like misrepresenting my opinions of things for money. Don't want to do that. The one thing I also lack in general is the ability to easily stack multiple different oscillators with different shapes, each at different pitches, where they're on per oscillator amount of unison, and route everything through a common filter. Yeah, you can do all that in Sortris. Let's finish reading the question, huh? And then route everything through a common filter. This paradigm is extremely common in the staples like SeamlessR, Inspire, but that lacking this capability have any practical impact on track production? Well, let's talk about how we don't lack that capability, because everything you just said could be done in Citrus. Let me show you how. All right, so let me actually make sure I got the list right. Oh, whatever, here's the thing. All right, multiple different oscillators, different shapes, different pitches, per oscillator amount of unison, and everything into a common filter. All right, cool. So in Citrus, actually, and in Harmor too, but not quite as to that level that you were just describing. There is a thing in the tabs list here. So here's the way the parameters work is that there's a tabs list at the top that's parameters, and a tabs list at the bottom that's modifiers. And the very last top of all the modifiers is this guy here that says UNI. And that stands for Unison Index Mapping. And this does precisely what you just described. You are able to change any of these parameters on a per unison voice basis. So see, let's put up 4 voices. You see 2 lines in the middle here, and then 2 sides, and that's where the parameters live. So like there needs to be a point on the actual like line for that for this particular parameter to do anything. Putting a point in the middle of a parameter does nothing. This point is doing nothing. So it's first voice, second voice, third voice, fourth voice. And you could do this to pitch. So you can do your own pitch, your own phase. So you can have individual unison control for every individual oscillator, and of course have different shapes and whatever. And like there's the shape control is whatnot. And you might say, okay, cool, it's cool. You can only have 6 shapes. And I'm not going to say this is as easy as what you're describing with things that like Serum and whatever can do, and with different things. But you can do is unison index mapping with volume and the mod input, which when we're talking about FM means that you could have extremely different waveforms because you have different levels of FM for every individual voice of unison for every individual oscillator. Now, when you're doing all that and you want to run it through all a common filter, as you say, you want to engage this up here, which is unison for oscillators only. When it's off, it clones all the filters. It's 4 whatever voices for the filters. And of course, actually, while it's happening, you have unison index control for all the parameters for things like control. So you can have like a phaser because you have 9 bandpass filters and spread out with the unison index mapping, which is pretty cool. So you turn that on, and that turns that off. So then the filters are just the 1 filters. So then if I wanted to route all 6 of these at each individually having a maximum of 9 individual pitch and phase and FM settings, and then route it through 1 filter. I'm pretty sure that's the list of things that you said that needed to happen. Yeah. And so, but also, I don't find it to be a tremendous impediment on track production, even if that wasn't a thing. It's honestly not something I think of very often. Gonna go back to this one and read more questions. Did you use other DAWs? Which? What do you think is too limited on FL Studio, and when do you want change, major or minor? Any opinions, funniest part of modulation? So, freaking, all right. I have used other DAWs. In fact, when I this probably doesn't really count, because when I was brand new, the very first thing I was ever greeted with was an option between Reason 2 and Fruity Loops 3. I tried both. I tried Reason. There were Macs in the computer lab at high school, which is where I was able to experiment with this. And I didn't understand a single thing about how Reason worked, because back then I didn't have any experience with any amount of production at all, which meant I never used any hardware either, which meant, come on. So FL was just as alien to me, but it helped that there was a person on staff there who actually knew how to use it and could tell me how to use it, versus Reason, it was just kind of like, here's a demo file, good luck. And I was very like, none of that makes any sense. After that, I have used other DAWs like Reaper. I used to use a lot before FL's recording capabilities really caught up. I didn't really use like Pro Tools or whatever, but Reaper was just fine for like multi-track recording. For I did with like in here even before this room was built like this. And what have I used anything beyond that? I might have tried to use Bitwig at one point. I have tried to use Reason more recently. A plugin developer actually wanted me to do some presets for a Citrus-like thing that I was totally on board with, but like I just really could not use Reason, and like the interface just hurt. And it's not anything against them. It's that I'm used to FL. They're pretty, whatever. Too limited on FL. What do I want with the change of it? Well, FL's like audio warping capabilities are always going to be way more annoying than Ableton's. Like Ableton's just full on better about that, but FL is definitely making some pretty great strides about that. They recently actually have actual real-time stretching now, so I'm pretty excited about how that's going to work out. After that, it's sort of difficult to know, not just because I think FL is all the best for everything, but because I haven't used other DAWs very often. I don't actually know in what ways FL is limited. I know that about the audio warping thing just because I've just seen other people talk about how Ableton works, and I've also like in FL's alpha forums, blank redact, not telling you, but you know what I mean. I it's a known thing. What was the last one? Major or minor? Minor. In your opinion, the funniest part of modulation. Sometimes you get unexpected results that are just like the funniest sounds. I remember one time when Native Instruments Razer was new. Someone in an IRC chat I was with made a sound, and it was this like whippy high frequency thing. It was just pitching and everywhere, and it was just the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And I posted on a Seamless page somewhere on Facebook. This is back when I think before I had even 20K subscribers. So who even knows where it is now? But like that's the funniest part of modulation. Did I ever produce hip-hop? I'm asking because I have friends who want me to produce beats for them, but they want me to produce the beats first so they can rap over it. have a plan for what they want to track together before they come to me, but they seem to not to understand this concept. So yes, I did, and the unfortunate thing is what you're describing is just the relationship between a client and a producer. You're the engineer, they're the client, and they're like, the best you can do is ask for references. That's how I tend to go about it. And like what I mean by that is ask them to send you tracks they like and be like, okay, what do you want it to sound like? And they'll be like, I want to like to bounce hard or like groove, or they start throwing buzzwords at you. I'm always talking about buzzwords, and this is hell. This is buzzword hell, which you're in the life you're talking about right now. And so just try and get as much out of them as you can, and then like just ask for links on YouTube, links to like tracks they like, and then that's the best way you're going to have to be able to figure out precisely what they want. And that's really like for me, that's always been the best approach. Just trying to like parse their decisions to try and like work around it. And like, because you do get people who will just be kind of like, go do your thing, man. And like, you can do that, but they're not gonna like what you do precisely enough. And they might like it. Just don't go so hard on it, right? They don't like do every little individual detail until they're like, okay, I like the feel of it, and then you can go like finish it or whatever. But because they might just be like, no, all of that, even though they're just like, do your thing, man, because who can tell? Which would you say is the best superior drummer kit for neurofunk beats? Besides Maximus, what's your favorite limiter? Best superior drummer kit for neurofunk is probably the Metal Foundry, just because it's one of the bigger kits they have. There's that one, and then there's Roots, their jazz one. Roots also has a whole other pack that's the same kit, but with mallets and brushes and stuff. So there's lots of neat stuff you can do with that. But insofar as just like straightforward drums, and you have drums and snares and kicks and cymbals and stuff, then the Metal Foundry kit is just beautiful. It has such a flavor that's not really present in any of the easy drummer kits or any of the other like metal oriented superior kits, because there's plenty of those too. There's like Metal Machine, Rock Gods, I think also happened. Those are pretty cool. They're nice, but they're very like poppier. Like, I don't mean poppy in the sense that they pop in this thing, but poppier in the sense that they feel more focused towards pop music and poppier versions of it, I guess. Pop metal. Metal Foundry is dry as balls. It's like the out of the mic into the whatever console they had straight into that sample, and that's what you're playing right now. So there's no editing on it whatsoever, which is one of the reasons why I like it. And it's also got like among the bigger selections of mic positions, so you have lots of ambient options. Same thing with Roots. Roots has a lot of mics. So those are my two faves for that. How do I come up with ideas for my songs? It's usually pretty hard to follow every element you put in the songs. It's lots of trial and error, lots of making a loop, copying it, make small variations, copy that whole thing, make small variations, copy that whole thing, make small variations, that over and over again, and then like individual examination of every beat to make sure that it feels right. And so way back earlier in this video when I was talking about knowing when it sounds good, this is an excellent application of being able to use that power that us humans have of association. Because right now we're trying to associate our song with where we want to go in our head, and so we're listening to it, and you just want to like let that feeling happen to you. You want to feel it when you play your track and you play your drop, and like you don't like your beat, like your drum beat doesn't line up right, and the bass's modulation is out of time, whatever. You want to note that happening intensely, and then go in there and fix it. You're not gonna know how to fix it. You might know how to fix it. Just move it around and fix it. Move it around until it's fixed is what I'm saying. And just do that for every time you hit like a conflict in your head when you're playing it and you're going, ugh. Just go there, mess around with it, play it over and over again until you don't go, ugh. Like, be careful not to lose yourself in listening to the same thing for like 10 hours and then you can't be objective anymore. You might want to go check out your references every once in a while, take breaks and be responsible and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, lots of just moving stuff around until it sounds good. And then do that enough that you eventually just know what you want to do because you've done certain patterns enough that it's just that's second nature. My favorite limiter is actually just the Fruity limiter because it, like, honestly, the thing that the Fruity limiter and the Maximus both do that helps the most about compression is that you're able to just see what it's doing in real time. And, like, a lot of parameters, like, that's been FL's biggest boon to me, I think. And I didn't even know this when it was first new because I didn't know about any other comparable DAWs, is its visual nature. And so, because you are able to much more readily associate specific things with what's happening, you're much more able to debug your song that way because you can see things and you can help if you don't necessarily know how, especially if you're not like trained, if your ears aren't really trained very well. It's a tremendously appropriate crutch. Yeah. What effects do I normally put on drums? Can I make a video halftime tutorial on the genre? There's a genre called halftime. Yeah, okay, so effects. Whatever I need to. And what I mean by that is that the best case scenario for me is that I have a sample in whatever part of the kit I'm making that is precisely the way I want it to sound. Actually, the best case scenario would be if I found a drum loop that was like what I wanted to sound. That's just not going to happen. It's almost never happened. A lot of what I used to do when I was new was find drum loops and then like process them to try and sound like the way I wanted them to, which was more regularly mixed drums. So like all the stuff that I ever do the drums is to try and get it to be a way that I wanted to sound and to feel a particular way. And sometimes if the sample is already like hit hard enough and like loud enough and compressed enough and like leveled right, and I just play it all the right beat and whatever put together, I don't necessarily need to do like a lot to it. Sometimes I don't even need to put it in a bus and compress it. Like that's something I do to solve particular issues, you know, to try and like bring things together. Like if a sample had every single problem, the stuff that I would do to it would be like EQing and compression and like maybe some distortion if I wanted to like break stuff up and some parallel business. But they were just talking about this is like sound design now. Like if you think about like what drum mixing is, it's really all just damage control. So like the best solution is just not to have damage. Yeah. I feel like that was enough. I feel like we have done plenty of questions. If you have any extra questions, well, actually, if you have any questions you want to ask me and you want me to answer, ask it in this video, in these comments, and then when I do another one of these, those will be the questions that I ask and that I answer. If you have any questions about any of the process, I guess, please let me know. Big thanks to Razer, of course, and Splice. Please check out the links in the description of this video if you want to check them out. And as usual, have a nice day. Gonna go hit the off button.